There's been a lot of talk lately about going non-contact with family members. And specifically, people are talking about when your family of origin is toxic and you need to, for your own mental health, separate a little bit. Well, I've done that. And I had a very unique childhood. I was pretty much raised by my grandmother, although now and then my birth mother and birth father would come into my life. They were not together anymore, and they had different ways of looking at the world. So as growing up, I occasionally would have to interact with them. Once I became an adult, I tried to have a more mature relationship with both of them. And because they had me at quite a young age, it took them a while to become healthy, mature adults on their own. So I couldn't really interact with them at certain times in my life until I was more secure in who I was and was not influenced by their toxicity, and for them to get to a place where they could accept who I was without trying to change me or force their opinions on me. Each one, my mother and my father, had different issues. So now, my father unfortunately has passed, but my birth mother and I do communicate daily, and we get along quite well. This is after decades of not getting along, not talking, not being in communication. So if you want to go non-communication, cut them out from your life. If that's what you need to do, I think that's a good idea. It's self-preservation. Keep an open mind, though, because it doesn't mean they can't change. Some people don't change, no doubt about it. Some people regress, but some people can mature and get to the point where they can have a healthy relationship with you. Now, let's look at it from a different perspective. I have 3 adult sons, one of whom is highly toxic. He has been highly toxic since he was a teenager. He had a lot of problems. I won't go into the personal issues, ADHD, bullying at school, my separation from his father. I, of course, was not a perfect parent. No one is. So I take some of the responsibility for that, yes. But once he became an adult, he got involved in drugs, specifically methamphetamines, and to the point where he would steal from me and become very abusive, not only to myself, but to other family members. And he has a young daughter, had a young daughter at that time. Now he has 2 children. So it got to the point where he was doing drugs upstairs right after his second child was born, staying with me because he and the mother of his child, they never did get married, were homeless. So I opened my doors to them because he's my son and my grandchild was going to be born, and I felt bad for them. I felt sorry for them, but I knew this was a toxic situation, and I knew that it would not end well, but it ended worse than I thought. So after the child was born, they had been up all night with the baby, and I didn't know, but I suspect there were drugs involved because of the way he was behaving. There was a lot of anger for no reason. He had a puppy. The puppy needed to go out. I let the puppy out. I let the puppy back in. Everything was fine, and he was furious because I let his dog outside, and this was crossing some sort of a boundary to him. Long story short, he got physically violent. He beat me up and he broke my nose. And it was his girlfriend, the mother of my grandson, that stopped him from beating me up further. He pulled the phone out of the wall. I could not call for help. I was in a very rural area where I had no cell phone reception, so I could not call for help. It wouldn't work. And there was just no infrastructure for that. Very rural, 17 miles from the closest gas station. So 2 days later, I mean, I'm still bleeding. My nose is still bleeding. This was a very bad fracture. And my car wasn't working. He wouldn't let me leave the house. My ex-husband came to drop off our son, my third son, and I asked him if he would take me to the hospital. So he did, and because of that, mandatory reporting, he got in trouble with the law. There was a restraining order placed, and I knew that once that restraining order was expired, I was going to be in danger. I really didn't feel safe, even with the restraining order being in effect, because it's just a piece of paper. It's not going to stop somebody who really wants to hurt you. We all know that. We've all heard the stories. So I knew I had to sell my house and leave the state. I had to get as far away from him as I could, or it would get worse. Even though I knew I had to leave my son, my youngest son, there in Indiana. So it was very difficult for many different reasons. It broke my heart. I still can barely talk about it without getting teary-eyed because, you know, you love your kids and you want things to work out okay, but sometimes they just don't. Just like you love your parents, and sometimes you want to get along with them and you want things to be okay, but they aren't. And it takes two to have a relationship. And once your child is an adult and you no longer have the legal responsibility, you have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure that, you've heard the stories, your child doesn't end up killing you or maiming you. And I knew that's where we were headed. So, long story, I'm trying to make this shorter. I cut off contact with him for like 10 years. And I recently reached out to him and said, I'm sorry, I didn't know how to be the kind of mother you needed. I didn't know what else to say. Like I said, I take responsibility for how things ended up to a degree. I couldn't stop the bullying at school. I tried. I took him out of school. I put him in other schools. The teachers at schools, the people at school, they were useless. They suggested they take it out on the football field. I did not think that was a good idea. I didn't want him to play football. He didn't want to play football. That was not the issue. The issue was that they needed to control their students and stop the bullying, but they didn't. And one thing led to another, and he got involved with the wrong people. He wanted to go out and live with his birth father for a while. That ended up with him running away and ending up in a park with heroin addicts. So I tried. I didn't know what to do. I reached out to healthcare providers, mental health care providers. I did the best I could. Nobody's perfect. And like I said, yes, I take responsibility. Yes, I made mistakes. 10 years passed. I reached out to him. He jumped down my throat, telling me everything I've ever done in my entire life that was bad, every mistake I ever made, even things I didn't even do. And what's really ironic to me is the things that he was most upset about were things that happened before he was even born. So, you know, to me, obviously, he was still doing meth because, you know, I'd get these messages that he loves me and everything's fine, and then he'd jump down my throat without me even answering or saying anything that would provoke him. So, again, much to my chagrin, I had to cut off ties with him and just say, he's not ready. We're not ready to have a relationship yet. So sometimes you have to do that. They say blood is thicker than water, but again, you can't choose your family. And you can't make somebody be respectful and kind and courteous, compassionate and empathetic if they just don't want to be. And if they're doing drugs, if they're influenced by a substance or something that makes them incapable of thinking clearly, there's really nothing that you can do. So yeah, sometimes you have to go non-contact with family members, whether it's your parents or somebody who's older than you or your own children. It's not fun, it sucks, but you gotta preserve yourself. You gotta take care of yourself.